Glen. There was a question about some words that are not understood. When can we stop for consulting for translation among the group?
Sure. You mean if there's an English term that...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Right.
So I don't know, how would you like it to be? When should we... You understand what I say? We don't want to interrupt you while teaching, but...
Yeah. I mean, just put your hand up.
Okay.
And then then you can do.
Yeah, just... So...
Yeah, if there's anyone who doesn't understand the term, just put your hand up and then I'll finish the sentence or something and then I'll ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay? It's okay?
No problem. Before we go back to this practice, and of course the practice we're doing today, the Shamatha practice, is the practice of observing the mind. Alan Wallace calls that settling the mind in its natural state. And so this is a practice, a Shamatha practice of course. The object is the mind and any mental events that arise in the mind. Simply observing them as they arise and pass. Arise and pass. And again, it's very much recommended with this practice to have the eyes open, at least partially open, or naturally open. There's a number of reasons. One, of course, is eyes open helps to improve clarity of attention. With the eyes open, it helps to keep us more in the present moment. If we have them closed, much easier to drift in the past and future. And of course, also with the eyes open, it's much easier to transition into daily life, because also in daily life, we want to be able to observe thoughts and emotions without getting caught up in them. But if we've only meditated with eyes closed doing that, then it's hard to bring that into daily life, because normally we have our eyes open in daily life. Whereas if we meditate with eyes open, observing thoughts and emotions, we can more easily bring that into daily life. And of course, the last reason is that with the eyes open, it really starts to break down this false sense of duality. That with eyes closed, we can have a strong sense there's a me in here and a world out there, this subject-object duality. Whereas with eyes open, that sort of starts to break down, which is going to be very helpful, because later in the Vipassana practice, that's what we're actually coming to an insight into. There is no subject-object duality, that everything's interdependent. So there's one more thing I'd like to talk about before going to the meditation, but before even doing that, is there any questions about this practice that we've been doing so far today?
Can you please repeat the sequence of the loving kindness meditation, because I want to do it on my own as well.
The sequence of the loving kindness meditation. What do you mean by the sequence in terms of...
Objects.
So traditionally you start with friends first, but I think in the modern society it's best to start with ourselves first. Particularly if we don't really feel good about ourselves, that's where we need to start. But in the text, normally that's not mentioned. Normally in the text they start with friend. Once you're comfortable with that, you move out to people you don't know very well, the so-called strangers. And once you're comfortable there, then you move out to include difficult people, people you don't like so much, and then eventually to all living beings. That's sort of the sequence.
That's not what I meant. The last meditation we did with being kind to ourselves, you led us through guided meditation.
Today?
Yes.
That was empathetic joy.
Empathetic joy, right. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. So there's sort of two things there that can be very helpful. Because remember, empathetic joy is a rejoicing in our own and others' virtue and good fortune. So then I think it's good. What a good meditation is to do like this timeline of your life. That you go back on the timeline of your life and you go back to your earliest memories, and you can start with the memories of when you did something good. You were kind to someone else or even kind to yourself. And then move slowly along from that through your childhood, adolescent, adult years, slowly up to the present day. and remembering times in your life where you had these acts of kindness, where you did not only good things for other people, that you did good things for yourself, and really rejoice in that. And then again, to go back along the timeline of your life a second time, and this time bring to mind the earliest act of kindness that you can remember receiving from someone else, and then again move along the timeline of your life very slowly from that point up to the present day, and just remember or bring to mind all the different people that helped you and supported you and were kind to you in your life, and then just really rejoice in that and be grateful for that, and really rejoice that these people have brought such kindness into the world. And of course, very often when the first time when we try to remember when we did good things, often people have a little bit of difficulty with this, because they often feel like, oh, I didn't really do much, I wasn't very kind, but because often people think of, because they didn't do some huge thing, then therefore they weren't kind. But we're kind in many, many ways, and even like just being there for someone is being very kind. So these are all acts of kindness.
And what do you mean by rejoice? Because when you meditate, you don't actually... What do you mean by rejoice?
Rejoice means when you bring that to mind, just be happy about that. Just sort of have a joyful mind when you're looking at that. Just be joyful when you look at that, that's all. You're not actually, yay.
Maybe appreciate.
Like loving kindness and compassion, it's easy to understand that it's a wish for. In empathic joy, in continuation, it's a bit difficult because I'm sort of looking for the emotion. I don't have,
well, the emotion is joy.
So it's different than compassion.
Yeah. This is an emotion.
It's actually I'm working on raising my emotion to feel empathic joy.
Yes, here what we're doing is we're bringing to mind, when we see good things that we and others do, is just really have joy in that. Just be happy with that. Be joyful
So
when we see that.
I'm building the emotion. It's not an intention.
No, it's not intention. The intention is to focus on the good things, and then based on that intention, then we have that joy, radiate that joy.
What to do about, I think that it's like you said about the media, our mind is sort of tuned to be able to call for negative emotions very quickly. But to call for positive emotions, it's almost like going against the grain.
I think that's why I think it's important not to, expose ourselves unnecessarily to too much negative media. I mean, it's not so easy, but I think that, we can really cut that down. We don't have to be there, soaking up all that. And then I think it's good to actually look for good news stories. I mean, they're harder to find because they're not so... But I think, there are avenues now and media things that are trying to promote, to put forward good news things that are happening in the world, but we have to search for them a little bit. But I think it's helpful to find this sort of media to really get a balanced view of the world.
Can I ask a question about the Shamatha practice?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
I found myself repeating my thoughts to myself to try to slow down some of what I was noticing. As if
repeating in what?
Like, not noticing, but actually repeating the full thought. Or the full saying, oh, I saw an image of X. So trying to make sure that I observed it well.
Right.
But then I found myself commenting on the repeater, and then
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, in the beginning stage of any of these practices, a little bit of commentary can be helpful, but maybe this is going a little bit too far. And of course, initially, particularly because our clarity is not very good, and actually some of these mental events are not so clear, then it doesn't really matter so much if it's really vividly clear. Because remember the order: relaxation, stability, clarity. So if we're having a relaxed mind and then something's coming up but it's not so clear, then the first step is not get caught up in it. So just watch it. And even if it's not very clear, but if we can watch it, something, oh, okay, there was something. That's the first step. And then if we keep doing that, then we can start to improve clarity. Then you'll find over time these mental events which are not so clear before start to become more and more clear. So don't worry too much about the fact initially that it wasn't very clear what was appearing. The first step is just not get caught up in it. Then clarity we can work on a bit later.
Yeah, just to make sure, because I think you mentioned it, but when you practice, when you observe the mind, so when you try to focus on the thoughts and they're kind of like gone, kind of like fleeting, so is that alright, or should you adjust? It's alright.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Or you should adjust.
No, before that you said that they're what?
Fleeting?
Fleeting.
Kind of? Yeah.
Fleeting, yeah. No, very good. Very good.
That's good.
Excellent, because a thought can only stay there if you're feeding it. Either if you're identifying with it or you're trying to suppress it, then it'll stay there. Mm-hmm. If you're just watching, I mean, there's nothing feeding, so something will sort of come and then...
Kind of like abrupt? That's
Sorry?
cool. It feels kind of abrupt, almost like...
Abrupt?
Like, yeah, like you kind of get cut, cut in the middle, and it's kind of... That's alright?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we're not trying to cut, so we're not trying to get rid of them. But actually, usually if we try to get rid of something, it sort of stays there because we have to focus on it to push it away. So the fact that it's just like fleeting, it's a good sign. Good.
So one of the things I tried to do was to think about when I was going blank. I tried to think about something that I knew would hook me a little bit, or at least try to.
Hook you.
I mean, I knew something that would create thoughts when I'm not sitting in meditation.
Okay.
So a situation that normally I would leap into. But then I kind of found myself feeling like I was goading myself a little bit. Goading? Like trying to goad someone into...
Yeah.
And then I got into a conversation with, I ended up feeling like I was sort of dancing with the observer and, like, I'm not going to go there, but you want to go there, but I'm not going to go there. And then it's just sort of and then I would laugh at the whole situation and then move on.
Good. Laughing at it is good. But here, remember, if there's no thoughts there, then that's okay. We just watch that. We just stay in that space. It's not like, oh, there's no thoughts there. I need to generate something. I need something to happen. So we don't need to do that. So if there's no thoughts there, then remember it's early as rubbed off, just be careful that you're not tensing because you can suffocate. So just, if there's no thoughts, just notice, if you're tense, if you are, relax. Or if you notice you're half asleep, then sharpen. But apart from that, just stay there. Just
observing is not understanding. Like, for my own, like, to observe something doesn't mean you have to really understand.
No, that's Vipassana. In Shamatha,
because there were things that were happening, and I was just like,
yeah, no. So here in Shamatha, we're not trying to understand why this thought is here, where did it come from, who's the observer. This is all Vipassana stuff. So we don't want to be bringing those sort of investigation in here because then we've already gone into Vipassana mode. These are very valid questions. Who is the observer? Where did that thought come from? What is its nature? Why is it there? These are all valid questions. But they're the questions we ask in Vipassana practice. Of course, if a question comes up on the basis of that, like, oh, who's the observer, then just observe that thought. Don't entertain the question, because then we've gone out of shamatha practice and we're into vipassana. There was a question down the back.
Two questions about labeling.
Right.
One, when you gave example about how to label, then you said that we should label, for example, thought, memory.
Simple.
Simple, right. So why do I need to label the emotion itself? Because you didn't say label emotion, you said label anger, jealousy, love, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could just go emotion. That's fine.
So why did... Okay, so it's okay.
Well, yeah, it's fine. I mean, again, keep it simple, but, you know, it can be also helpful to notice what type of emotion it is. That's okay. But, I mean, again, if it's, you know, if you're getting irritated by something, don't label irritated by noise.
Right.
Because then you're focusing on the noise. Just sort of label irritation. And with the thought, you could even do more than just thought. You could say, you could divide it up a little bit, like thought of past thought, future, present. I mean, but again, don't make it too elaborate, because then it becomes really commentary on commentary on commentary. And remember, labelling is not part of the actual practice. It's only something we would bring in if we're getting caught up a lot as a short-term strategy to give us a little bit of space. Eventually we'll have to let go of it altogether.
That's my second question.
Yeah.
Why? Why would I need to let go of it at a certain point?
Because you're adding artificial activity. And you will find that as you go deeper into the practice, it starts to become a distraction, because you're interrupting with some extra activity.
What is the extra activity?
The extra activity is you're adding something. You're consciously adding something as opposed to just observing.
Can you talk a little bit more about memory?
About memories, yeah.
When I meditate, just faces came up. And
Good.
when faces?
Yeah, sure. I mean, people, of course, even as an individual, we'll have a lot of different things happening. You know, one session we may have a lot of memories come up, another one, maybe a lot of emotions come up, another one, a lot of thoughts come up, and another one, not much comes up. So there'll be a lot of variation. And some people, people have different sort of modalities. So for some people, they'll have a lot of visual things happening. Not eye, but mentally visual. Others will have a lot of, like, through sounds or through sensory stuff, but mentally. So there's a lot of differences there. So that's okay.
The emotion, it's like I heard the word and then I have the emotion, but it was in my body.
Right.
It's not it's a word, like it was a memory or something I remember. I could see one word and immediately the body reacts.
Sure. So remember, in this shamatha practice, we're only observing mental objects. So we're not observing or paying attention to anything in the body, sounds, visual objects, smells and tastes. Because if we want to, in a shamatha practice, to cultivate mindfulness, then it's more helpful to have a more narrow object. If the object is too wide, meaning anything that appears, our attention is moving around between the sense faculties too much, and that's not as effective for increasing mindfulness. Of course, that's a good thing to do in daily life and so forth, but
where's the emotion? Where is it?
The emotion is in your mind. Emotions don't happen in the body.
Like if I was sad, I could feel I was sad.
Correct. So
I could feel the tears.
Sure. So every emotion has a corresponding effect in the body. But we are just to notice the sadness in our mind and not the tears falling down the face or the tension in the heart area or anything
So
like that.
It's not words. It's not how it's.
It's a feeling
It's a feeling.
in the mind. No sadness. You say, I feel sad. No? Don't you?
Yes. It's
Just
in the
observe.
mind. I don't understand that.
What
Because
don't you
in the
understand?
mind I can see words, I can see mental images.
But when you're joyful, isn't that happening in your mind? Your joy,
I feel it here.
you feel it there, but your joy itself, the joy itself, you feel a lot of sensations here that come with the joy. But sensations in the body is not joy.
Okay, I understand.
You know.
Yes.
Another point on that actually is important.
So it's energy in your mind. I don't understand.
Energy.
It's like
Well, normally when we use the word energy, energy as it's normally known as physical. So mind is not physical.
it's
So
not so. It's not a thought.
actually here
It's not an image.
in Buddhism, when you, particularly Tibetan Buddhism, when you see the word thought in the text, actually it's often a generic term, which actually literally means conceptual activity.
Yes.
So actually often thoughts in the text here is not just thinking, it's all conceptual activity, which includes memories, emotions, mental images. These are all conceptual activity.
That's what I don't understand. Emotion and conceptual. כלומר,
All emotions are conceptual. So thinking is conceptual, mental images is conceptual, memories are conceptual, emotions conceptual. All of this is conceptual activity. Whereas when you look at a cup, looking at that is not conceptual because you're directly just seeing some colour and shape. But usually what happens is when we look at something or sense something or hear something that's direct, it's not conceptual, usually what happens is immediately upon that, so we look, we see some colours and shapes, so that's non-conceptual, we're directly seeing the colour and shape. But then our conceptual mind goes, that's a cup. So that thought, cup, is conceptual. So in this practice, if there's like a sound outside, we're not really paying attention to it, but what will probably happen is that sound may generate a thought like, noisy dog. So if a thought comes up, noisy dog, then you observe that thought.
and where's the feeling? Like if I don't like it,
Well, then you don't like it, you have some irritation in your mind, and together with that you probably have some tension in the body. But we're not paying attention to the tension in the body. Just let it be there. We're not trying to block it, but we're not interested in that.
I understand conceptual in Hebrew it's מושגי. מושג זה, אני לא מבינה את החיבור בין מושג לבין רגש.
זה יותר תפיסה. תפיסה, איך אתה תפיסה.
So in English there's perceptual versus conceptual. When you perceive something, it's direct. You perceive
זה תפיסה.
colour and shape, sound, sensation, direct. But then our conceptual mind interprets that and goes, pain, cup, dog, bird.
Okay.
That's conceptual.
Like in the observing the mind meditation, so when
שאלו את השאלה בבקשה יותר בקול, כי לא שומעים.
If you can repeat.
Sure. Okay.
so when in the observing the mind, so when thoughts come and noticing them and they just like pass, that's quite clear in what happens. But then sometimes like a song comes into my head, and then it's like I have to wait until it's finished, even though I'm doing like exactly the same.
So the question is, watching thoughts arise and pass, that's clear, but sometimes a song comes in the head. What to do? not to do is to get caught up in it or try and get rid of it.
Yeah, but I feel like it's working on deeper levels of the mind, like the mind, like it's working on the deeper levels of the mind in some way. Like I'm doing exactly the same as I'm doing with other thoughts, but.
So you're saying that the song is working at a deeper level. In what sense? It's harder to watch it?
Harder? No, it's I don't know. That's a question. Like, if there is a yeah.
Right. So as I mentioned, there are a number of levels of the mind, and now if our mindfulness is not very good, we only tend to notice very superficial things. In fact, there's a lot of mental activity going on that we don't notice. It's only when they become more coarse, like anger. Now we only notice it when it's already fairly strong. We don't tend to notice the beginning of anger because it's still, our clarity is not very good. So sort of there's some irritation, anger, and it's only when it gets certain strength we go, oh, anger. But usually by then, we're already out of control. So if we're doing the shamatha practice, that threshold between conscious and subconscious will go down a lot, which means we'll start to notice more subtle mental activity and we'll notice more quickly the beginning of things like anger. So I'm still not sure I understand what you mean by the songs operating at a deeper level.
What do you do with the song?
So what you don't do with a song is you don't allow yourself to get caught up in it, but also you don't try to get rid of it.
So what do you do then?
You just watch it. And with a mind that thinks if it's there, it's okay. If it's not there, it's also okay. If we have this attitude, if it's there, it's okay. If it's not there, it's okay. No problem. Usually, with this sort of thing, particularly if we like the song, we go, ah, and we go, rah, 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 rah. Or if we're doing this practice, we go, oh no, that song. Oh no, go away, go away, go away. And then of course it stays and gets louder and louder and louder. So if it arises, we just watch it and have this attitude like, if it's there, it's okay. If it's not there, it's also okay. It doesn't matter. And just watch.
Also in life.
Same. In everything.
In everyday life.
Absolutely.
Like if I recognize a bad mood coming, like today, and only the yoga saved me from that.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah.
Like I could feel it, I know it, I let it be.
Yeah, but of course, this is a little bit different here because we're talking shamatha practice. So in daily life, then we need to often respond to things and in case of a bad mood, try to apply antidote and so forth. Whereas here in this practice, whatever's arising, we just watch it arise and pass, that's all.
So I was thinking, until now, mostly the practice was making me very calm. I'm talking about after sessions.
Oh, after this practice, after the session?
After the sessions, until the observing the mind.
Oh,
And
when
then-
you were... Sorry, say again. So
Outside
when
the
you were
practice.
using the breath, afterwards you felt calm,
Yeah.
but now you're using this, afterwards you're not.
Extremely not.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple of things here. One is that, again, in this practice, there can really